This is Top Accolade Global News Updates. I am Soy Bifa Jackridge. Turkish, Jordanian, and Iraqi officials said on Sunday that Iran gave wide notice days before its drone and missile attack on Israel. But US officials said Tehran did not warn Washington and that it was aiming to cause significant damage. Iran launched hundreds of drones and missiles on Saturday in a retaliatory strike after a suspected Israeli strike on its embassy compound in Syria. Most of the drones and missiles were downed before reaching Israeli territory, though a young girl was critically injured and there were widespread concerns of further escalation. Iran and Foreign Minister Hossein Amir-Abdollahian said that Iran gave neighboring countries and Israel ally the United States 72 hours notice it would launch the strike. Turkey's foreign ministry said it had spoken to both Washington and Tehran before the attack, adding it had conveyed messages as an intermediary to be sure reactions were proportionate. Iran said the reaction would be a response to Israel's attack on its embassy in Damascus and that it would not go beyond this. We were aware of possibilities. The developments were not a surprise, said a Turkish diplomatic source. One senior official in US President Joe Biden's administration denied Amira Abdullahian's statement, saying Washington did have contact with Iran through Swiss intermediaries but did not get notice 72 hours in advance. Tehran sent United States a message only after the strikes began and the intent was to be highly destructive, said the official, adding that Iran's claim of a widespread warning may be an attempt to compensate for the lack of any major damage from the attack. We received a message from the Iranians as this was ongoing through the Swiss. This was basically suggesting that they were finished after this, but it was still an ongoing attack, so that was their message to us, the US official said. Iraqi, Turkish, and Jordanian officials each said Iran had provided early warning of the attack last week, including some details. The attack with drones, cruise missiles, and ballistic missiles risked causing major casualties and escalating the conflict, US officials said on Friday and Saturday. They expected an imminent attack and urged Iran against one, with Biden tersely saying his only message to Tehran was "Don't." Global airlines faced disruptions to flights on Monday after Iran's missile and drone attacks on Israel further narrowed options for planes navigating between Europe and Asia. Iran's attack on Israel by more than 300 missiles and drones, which were mostly shot down by Israel's US-backed missile defense system, caused chaos in the aviation industry. At least a dozen airlines have had to cancel or reroute flights over the last 2 days, including Qantas, Germany's Lufthansa, United Airlines, and Air India. This was the biggest single disruption to air travel since the attack on the World Trade Center on September 11, 2001. According to Mark Z, founder of OOPS Group, which monitors airspace and airports, the latest routing problems are a blow to an industry already facing a host of restrictions due to conflicts between Israel and Hamas and Russia and Ukraine. Iran's airspace is used by airlines traveling between Europe and Asia, and those carriers will be restricted to two viable alternative routes, either through Turkey or via Egypt and Saudi Arabia, Z said. Israel closed its airspace on Saturday before reopening them on Sunday morning. Jordan, Iraq, and Lebanon also resumed flights over their territories. Major Middle East airlines, including Emirates Airlines, Qatar Airways, and Etihad Airways, said on Sunday they would resume operation in the region after cancelling or rerouting some flights. It was not yet clear if the latest unrest would impact passenger demand, which has remained robust despite ongoing conflict in Ukraine and Gaza, said Braden Sobi, independent aviation analyst. If the political situation and the conflict continue to escalate, then at some point people will be concerned about traveling. But so far, that hasn't happened, Sobi said. Oil prices fell on Monday as market participants dialed back risk premium following Iran's weekend attack on Israel that the Israeli government said caused limited damage. Brent futures for June delivery fell 50 cents or 0.5% to $89.95 a barrel by 0630 GMT, while West Texas Intermediate's WTI futures for May delivery were down 52 cents or 0.6% at 85 $1.14 a barrel. Iran's attack involved more than 300 missiles and drones and was the first on Israel from another country in more than 3 decades, raising concerns about a broader regional conflict affecting oil traffic through the Middle East. But the attack, which Iran called retaliation for an airstrike on the Damascus consulate, caused only modest damage. With missiles shot down by Israel's Iron Dome defense system, Israel, which is at war with Iran-backed Hamas militants in Gaza, has neither confirmed nor denied it struck the consulate, as Iran currently produces over 3 million barrels per day of crude oil as a major producer within the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC. Supply risks include more strictly enforced oil sanctions and that an Israeli response could involve targeting Iran's energy infrastructure, Ng also said in a separate client note on Monday. If there was a significant supply loss, however, the US could release further crude oil from its strategic petroleum reserves, while OPEC has more than 5 million PBD of spare production capacity, it said. If prices were to rally significantly on the back of supply losses, one would imagine that the group would look to bring some of this spare capacity back onto the market. OPEC will not want to see prices going too high given the risks of demand destruction, Ng said in the notes. Analysts were widely expecting at least a short-lived rally in prices this morning, but said the more significant and longer-lasting price effects from the escalation would require a material disruption to supply, such as constraints on shipping in the Strait of Hormuz near Iran. Apple's smartphone shipments dropped about 10% in the first quarter of 2024, hurt by intensifying competition by Android smartphone makers aiming for the top spots, data from research firm IDC showed on Sunday. Global smartphone shipments increased 7.8% to 289.4 million units during January to March, with Samsung at 20.8% market share, clinching the top phone maker spot from Apple. The iPhone maker's steep sales decline comes after its strong performance in the December quarter when it overtook Samsung as the world's #1 phone maker. It's back to the second spot with 17.3% market share as Chinese brands such as Huawei gain market share. Xiaomi, one of China's top smartphone makers, occupied the third position with a market share of 14.1% during the first quarter. South Korea's Samsung, which launched its latest flagship smartphone lineup, Galaxy S24 series, in the beginning of the year, shipped more than 60 million phones during the period. Global sales of Galaxy S24 smartphones jumped 8% compared to last year's Galaxy S23 series during the first 3 weeks of availability, data provider Counterpoint previously said. In the first quarter, Apple shipped 50.1 million iPhones, down from 55.4 million units it shipped same period last year, according to IDC. Apple's smartphone shipment in China shrank 2.1% in the final quarter of 2023 from a year earlier. The drop underscores the challenges facing the US firm in its third biggest market, as some Chinese companies and government agencies limit employees' use of Apple devices, a measure that mirrors US government restrictions on Chinese apps on security grounds. The Cupertino, California-based company in June will hold its Worldwide Developers Conference, WWDC, where it will highlight updates to the software powering iPhones, iPads, and other Apple devices. A rally in the US dollar is accelerating as stubborn inflation sows doubt over how aggressively the Federal Reserve will be able to cut rates this year compared to other central banks. The US dollar index, which measures the greenback against a basket of 6 major currencies, is up 4.6% this year and stands near its highest levels since early November. The index rose 1.7% last week, its biggest weekly gain since September 2022. The greenback Feedback is advancing as market participants grow convinced the Fed will need to leave interest rates at current levels for longer to avoid a potential resurgence of inflation. Last week's stronger than expected consumer price data bolstered that view. Investors late Friday were pricing it in just 50 basis points of interest rate cuts in 2024. Futures markets showed compared to 150 basis points priced in at the start of the year. By contrast, investors believed some global central banks, including the European Central Bank, the Bank of Canada, and Sweden's Riksbank, could have a freer hand to ease monetary policy. That is a shift from a few months ago when many believed the Fed would be among the first to cut rates. Yield differentials between the US and other economies have widened in recent weeks, contributing to the greenback's rally as higher yields boost allure of dollar-denominated assets. The two-year US-German bond spread stood at its widest since 2022, late Friday. LSEG bullish investors have increased their bet on the dollar, while bears have wavered. Net bet on the dollar in futures markets stood at $17.74 billion in the latest week. Data from the Commodity Futures Trading Commission showed the highest level since August 2022. Central bank policy has diverged in recent months, reflecting economies' varying struggles to contain inflation. The Swiss National Bank reduced rates by 25 bps in March, its first cut in 9 years. Sweden's central bank has signaled it could cut rates in May if inflation keeps falling, while the Bank of Canada recently suggested it was ready to ease. Central banks in Australia, Britain, and Norway, on the other hand, appear less eager to loosen monetary policy. That is the size of Top Accolade, the global news update. You can follow us on our social media platforms as displayed on your screen. Happy Monday.